New Clothes by Julia Alvarez. It has six stanzas, and I thought in my analysis I'll be going one by one, and I will tie it all together at the end. So let's start with our first stanza. Okay, at this point you can go ahead and pause the video and take the time to read the first stanza if you'd like. I'll start with what stuck out to me as one of the focuses of this first stanza. Invisibility, the idea of invisibility. Four of the lines contain some form of not being seen, blind stitches, blind, invisibility, as if she had not made them. Words like this, I think, is a reflection of the work that typically mothers put into their children's lives. There's an importance placed on hiding this work, her expert craftsmanship with clothes. And I think the general attitude of motherhood is being unseen, not allowing your children to know just how much you're struggling, how much you're suffering, things like that. Um, so I think the speaker is exemplifying that feeling through this mother's expertise in not only being able to make the clothes, but also doing so in such a perfect and hidden way. Yeah. Moving forward. Okay, so here I've highlighted any mention of fabrics or tools like the pins, the skirts, the lace binding, puckered sleeves, things like that. Um, so I think here the speaker is trying to lay out all the little pieces of this kind of work, and this highlights the overwhelming feeling of having to get all of these pieces and somehow bring them together. I kind of tie this again back to motherhood, but in this poem specifically, the mother is already an expert. She already knows what to do with these pieces. So we see her as a kind of parent that can handle the kind of stress and everything that comes with parenthood. So the fact that the speaker is observing her mom from afar and acknowledging that she is already an expert, she already knows what to do, I think there's admiration that is present in the beginning of this poem. All right, here's where you can pause for stanza two if you'd like to read. I highlight Ariadne because the book points her out as a Greek mythology figure that helped Theseus take down the Minotaur in the labyrinth by sneaking him a piece of thread. The speaker likens her mother's hands to those of Ariadne's, so the admiration from stanza one continues into this one. But also, the idea of the thread kind of juxtaposes the impact of small, trivial things and their true size in someone's life. To elaborate, the thread in the Ariadne tale was pivotal in taking down an entire minotaur. And for readers, clothes is an everyday trivial thing. It's pretty in the back of the mind of readers, but to the speaker, this simple idea of clothes means so much more to her. It means her mother's efforts and her time. I also highlighted lines 17 through 20. They begin with V. Um, it's kind of like a list. The fabric, the bulb, the needle, the petal, they're all different parts of the machine, sounding off one right after the other, working in unison, but they all have their role. But also, I think this technique of anaphora is for creating I guess, the sound of the machine. It's very steady and very repetitive. Also, the listing of the different fabrics, gingham, poplin, seersucker, and cambric. The book points out that this is all cotton fabrics. I think this is a reflection of the mother and her work, um, her pride in her work. Even though she has resorted to having to make her daughter's clothes, she can't really go out and just buy it. She that doesn't stop her from using quality fabric like cotton that typically it doesn't really hold odors. Um, and it's still widely available. It's not too expensive. So this speaks a lot on the quality of her work. And the last two lines, the pedal pressed heavily down with the weight of one woman, eyes intent, hands feeding and receiving the fabric. I think that these two lines kind of mold her along along with the machine. I don't think mold is the right word. It kind of combines her with the machine. It makes her um, not separate from it. Basically, this machine is a part of her and she is a part of the machine. Um, yeah. Jumping right into the third stanza, I want to point to lines 25 and 27. I've highlighted those parts that contain forms of repetition. The speaker is impatiently helping the mom. She's an amateur in the skill of sewing. So the repetition conveys the tedious process of learning a new skill to do something over and over, takes the excitement away from the act and just makes it kind of mundane. I want to compare the lines 25 to 27. We see a progression of skill in the repetition. So line 25 is just going in circles, repeating entire words, minute, minute, patient, impatient, foot to foot. I think this exemplifies the lack of skill in the speaker. She's repeating entire words and there's really no kind of formula to it. But in line 27, the impatient kind of subsides and the repeated word becomes only a repeated sound, making it more formulated, taking out the seam, sewing, snipping. So that repetition is still there, but it's more functional. They're words or words phrases of action as well. So I thought to point that out. Okay, so lastly, I want to point out that this stanza begins with the speaker being on the left side of the mother, associating a handcraft with the left side to the typical right-handed reader, places them out of the comfort zone. This, I believe, is meant to contrast the following stanza, which will show further progression for the speaker as we move forward. Okay, so moving forward, here is stanza 4. Okay, so stanza 4 begins with the speaker being at the right side of her mother this time. This is a major shift into a more comfortable position for the speaker or the reader. Um, Usually a right hand man or a right hand woman when somebody who's trusted. So the amateurity is gone from the image of the speaker. The listing continues. By listing, I mean the act of constantly having lists as we've seen in the first three stanzas. It continues here as lines 23 through 31 begin with ing verbs. She is turning the wheel, handing her scissors, threading her needles. The speaker is doing things, practicing the craft of sewing, even if she's just a helper. This gives the image of the speaker participating with the machine that is the singer and the mother. Also, I point to line 34, listing of green colors of threads and fabrics. The color green has a sense of freshness. We associate freshness with clean, crisp, natural things like that. So for line 38, to immediately list different pieces of clothes, ties the clothes to crisp cleanliness. These clothes are better than store bought, like the following line says. This clothes is basically the speaker feels that the clothes is more quality because, my mother made it with her hands, with her love and her attention to detail. Okay, so the last two stanzas I put in the same slide. By the fifth stanza, we see the speaker and her mother working together until the end of the day. So we also see that this stanza moves away from the mechanical technique that Alvarez has used in the past four stanzas now. Like I said earlier, she uses a lot of listing, like repetition, anaphors, the things that I've mentioned before. Um, I think that technique was to give a mechanical sense to this poem. But this is the end of the day by stanza 5. So this gives the mother a breather for just literally one line, line 43, where she rubbed at the small of her back. Glanced at the time. This short moment, we, the readers, step away from the machine along with the mom, and we experience warmth as well in the last two lines of the stanza. Sleeves and sheets literally are for warmth, but figuratively in this poem, these are her mother's hands holding her as she's getting ready for bed, since the sleeves are a product of her hands and the sheets smell of her hand cream. Um, So, all in all, stanza 5 is a step away from the mechanical machine that is the day's work of this mother and her daughter. Now, stanza 6, very short and sweet, 4 lines with very rich with sound. This is kept short and simple, I think, to convey the mother's resilience and strength. It is the end of the day, but after putting her daughter to sleep, she goes right back down to continue working. There's not really any protest or any kind of, I guess, attitude of, oh, like she's tired. There's none of that. Um, I waited in the dark as she left me. So she doesn't really know how her mom feels. All she knows is that um, this mother has a lot to be done, and she just simply continues work as though another day of sewing awaits her. And this, I think, begins, even though it's the end of the day, it begins a whole other cycle of um, a new day of work. Okay, so just for my conclusion, I wanted to go over my thoughts for the poem, especially one of the themes being motherhood. The There's nothing that the speaker's mother would not do for her child in this poem in particular. There is a lot of effort that she puts into all the details of her daughter's life. So even though they're just talking about new clothes in this poem, through the process that she goes through um, in making these things, you can only imagine all of the other kinds of things that this mother does for the child. And another theme I would say is the cyclical day of the parent. Along with good parenting, there is consistency. There has to be constant working, constant taking care of the children. It may not seem like this that you do the same thing every day, but really with consistency, that means you need routine. That means there is a certain process to everything that you do. And I think Alvarez, in her use of, like I've said before, in her use of all of these lists and her use of laying out all of the parts, like the fabrics and the little the parts of the machine, the tools, she laying all of this out for the reader. I think that Alvarez wishes to convey just how much goes into parenthood and mastering all of those things for the child. It's very much overwhelming. And adding to that overwhelming sense of parenthood, there's also the heavy imagery. Pretty much, with the exception of maybe the fifth stanza and the sixth, probably, there is a lot of listing. There is so much of one, two, three, four, one after the other type of sounds. So I think with that, it gives the reader a sense of life not stopping. It's not going to stop for anything. It's just going to keep on coming. Your children are going to keep on growing. They're going to continue needing things, and the use of the speaker watching her mother work at something like a sewing machine speaks reflects very nicely on the idea of life coming at you constantly. Okay, that is the entire presentation. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen, and I am sorry for stuttering so much. Thank you.